Brock says, "Show me the money, Jed. Show me the money." Brock wants his bag. Will the 49ers cave and meet his demands? Or will John and Kyle say, "Help me help you"? We'll talk about that and more next.
Yo, it's time to grind. With Brian on the mic, content is one of a kind. Now, welcome to my show, the BS Report, where we let the truth flow. We're breaking down the stories, shining light on the games. No fake news here, just hot takes throwing flames. The BS Report, yeah, we're keeping it tight. Bringing you the news, making it ignite. Tune in, turn it up, feel the heat rise. With Brian in the house, our takes won't be compromised. From the latest news to the hottest debates, in the BS Report, we're setting the stakes. So come along, join the ride, where Brian and his subscribers are full of Niner pride. Yo.
What's going on, everybody? This is the BS Report, and I am your host, Brian. So, Brock Purdy has, I would say maybe through his agent, maybe his agent's doing it more than likely without, much input for Brock at this point, but it has come out that Brock Purdy is wanting to reset the quarterback market and be paid upwards of $60 million a year. Is this a good idea? Like I have said many times in the past, I am a huge Brock Purdy fan for many reasons. I would love nothing more than to see the guy succeed. But at this point, I think that the writing has been on the wall since last season, actually, the Baltimore game. I just don't think that unless all the conditions are perfect, unless he has a whole slew of all pros surrounding him, honestly, on both sides of the ball, that Brock Purdy is that upper echelon quarterback. I think Brock Purdy is a very good quarterback. Again, assuming that all the conditions are perfect for him, assuming that he has, an all-pro on the line, an all-pro in his receiver group, an all-pro tight end, the weather's good. Yeah, he can be fine. He can lead you to a lot of victories, and at times he can even look elite. And I would say in those conditions, he is an elite quarterback. When he has all those weapons, because he is so, well, I don't know if I can say he is, because he was so prolific as far as, getting through his reads, throwing with anticipation, being able to make quick decisions, and generally the right one. He has the ability to play at an elite level, but he has shown over the last season and even into a little bit of last season that he's not really capable of putting a team on his back and being that franchise quarterback, of being that Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes, Joe Burrow, the guys that are actually the closest to being worth $60 million a year. Purdy has shown that he needs all the conditions to be met for him to play at that level. And I just don't think that paying a guy with those kind of limitations, $60 million, is any recipe for success whatsoever. By doing that, we will set this franchise back for the duration of that contract. And I guess the 49ers could work out some sort of a deal where it looks like $60 million on the surface, but when you get into it, it's a lot closer to like a Jalen Hurts or a Trevor Lawrence contract. But based on what the agent is saying, I don't know that that's going to be okay with Brock. I would say this: if you could get Brock Purdy on a contract where it looks like 60 million, but in reality it's closer to 30 million, yeah, let's do it. But here's the other thing that I would say about that is, if you do that, that's not a standalone deal for this team, because even getting Brock at that discounted price, this team is not set up for him to have success. So if Brock Purdy plays next year and the year after that and the year after that the way that he played this year, he's not worth $30 million either. I'm sorry. That might not be a very popular, stance to take, but Brock Purdy this year is not playing as well as Baker Mayfield. He's not playing as well as Sam Darnold. You know, I would say Brock Purdy is playing more at the level, closer to the level of what Daniel Jones was playing this year than he is to the level that Sam Darnold or Baker Mayfield is playing this year. So when you couple that with the fact that Brock Purdy can't play in the weather, then even paying Brock $30 million a year, where are you getting the all-pro receivers? Because Debo's not an all-pro at this point anymore and isn't going to return to that. Ayuk is not going to be, at least not next year, he's not going to be. You have Kittle, yeah. Um, what is there to lead us to believe that Ricky Pearsall is going to be that? We haven't got to see anything from Jacob Cowing, and Jacob Cowing can come out next year and be lights out. But what is there? Is there any reason to think that he's going to turn into some all pro? No, there's not. Um, Christian McCaffrey is not going to be the offensive player of the year, all pro running back again. It's just not going to happen. So even getting Brock at that $30 million a year price tag, what does that actually do for this team? How it gives them some financial flexibility, but I would say that those savings, where that money is going to come in, is going to be in being able to offload guys like Hargrave, like Debo, um, maybe being able to re-sign guys like Greenlaw, Hufunga, but being able to reload this team with offensive talent is not going to come from free agency. We're not going to be able to go and sign a guy like T. Higgins um, to give Brock all pros around him. And that's what he needs to be successful, whether he's making $1 million, 30 million, or 60 million. It doesn't matter. He needs those all pros around him. So without just hitting an absolute home run in the draft, here's the other thing when it comes to the draft. There are so many things that we need. We need offensive line help in the worst way. We need defensive line help in the worst way. So where are we going to get the all-pro weapon for Purdy? Because at this point, the only all-pro weapon he has is George Kittle, and he had him this year, and we see what he's done. We're pretty sure that Kyle Shanahan's going to be the coach going forward. So what is there to lead us to believe that Kyle Shanahan is all of a sudden, after 8 years into year 9, going to change his offense and start to feature George Kittle, which would help Brock immensely? But what would make us believe that that's going to happen, that that's the case? So we have to assume that things are going to be kind of the status quo as far as how this offensive ran. He's going to get McCaffrey back, and he's going to run him into the ground. And then after that, he'll go to whoever's next. Probably won't be Jordan Mason. Probably is going to be Elijah Mitchell. And then Isaac Guerrero, because, Elijah Mitchell's probably going to get hurt almost immediately. So, with that being said, why should we believe that next year, even with Brock at 30 million or 45 million, is going to be any different than this year with the same weapons? Because I don't see an avenue for this team to improve the weapons. People can come back and live on this belief, well, next year we're going to get healthy and things are going to be better. Okay, let's assume that's true. Let's assume we do get healthy next year and things are better. Let's say we get Greenlaw back. Let's say McCaffrey gets back. Fine. There's 2 guys. we still don't have elite talent in the wide receiver because Ayuk is not coming back probably before this point next year. Maybe week 12, 10, he'll be back, but he's not going to be 2023 Ayuk. More than likely, I don't know whether I would say more than likely. There's a chance that Debo's going to be gone. And even if he's not going to be 2021 Debo. So those days are gone. So even having McCaffrey playing at the level that he played last year, you got to remember that last year McCaffrey played at the level that he played, but he also had all-pro Brandon Ayuk. He also had all-pro George Kittle. He also had Trent Williams playing at a level that was probably a lot higher than the level he's going to play going forward. And even though Debo was not 2021 Debo, he certainly was not 2024 Debo. So you can say that Jawan is playing better than he was last year, but not really. He's just being given more opportunities. So I believe that Jawan Jennings, if you look back towards the end, the latter parts of last season, was playing at the same level that he's playing at now. It's just that because of Ayuk going down and missing all of training camp, and because of Debo being a shell of his former self, Jennings is just by default getting more opportunity, and he's showing what he can do with it. So just because McCaffrey comes back doesn't mean that all of a sudden the 49ers are going to go back to 2023. There's a lot of other missing parts here. A lot of it also was the defense. A lot of people want to say all kinds of stuff about Steve Wilkes. The defense was good, but more than likely, we're not going to have Charvarius Ward anymore. It's likely we're probably not going to have, we may not have Hufanga anymore. We may not have Greenlaw anymore. Our defensive line is seriously depleted, and we don't have just immense amount of cap room to work with. So, excuse me. So with that being said, I don't see where even getting Purdy at that discount, and I don't see how this gets corrected in the next 2 or 3 years, especially with Kyle retaining his position and John Lynch retaining his position, because I don't see the two of them making the necessary moves from a personnel standpoint to get this corrected quickly. In order to do that, we have to be willing basically to punt on next season, which means we have to eat Debo's money. We have to eat all of Hargrave's money. We need to eat as many of these bad contracts, maybe even Trent, because you know what? Jalen Moore's doing a fine job. He's not playing at an all-pro level, but he's not playing at a bum level either. He's doing fine. He's doing good enough. So as many of these big, bloated, bad contracts as we can get out from under, we need to do that. And paying Brock $60 million certainly means that's harder to do. Although they can structure it in a way that gets pushed down the road, and we can still do that. But the only way that this is going to get corrected quickly is by doing that. I don't see this front office and the brain trust in this organization making a decision to do that. I don't see it happening. So I would say that more than likely, I think the odds are at least as likely as not that Debo's back next year, that Juszczyk is back next year, that Trent's back next year, that Hargrave's back next year. Because one thing that this organization has showed us is that they're willing to run it back. I don't see, and if I had to guess, my guess would be that Purdy is going to end up somewhere in the range of 4 years and $57 to $58 million a year. I think that the Niners will try to save a little bit of face and not hit that 60 mark, but they always cave. They always do. Name the last player that they didn't cave on. Buckner, I guess. Um, but since that point, every guy who comes up, they pay him sometimes to the detriment of this team. I would say lately, all the times to the detriment of this team. So, in my opinion, Brock's going to get his money, and we're going to keep kicking the can down the road, which means we're not going to have the ability to load up the offense around Brock. So whether Brock is making $1 million next year, $30 million next year, 45, 55, or 65, it does not matter next year. Because next year, this team is going to be basically pretty close to what this team is this year. And Brock's performance is going to be pretty similar next year to what it is this year. Look at guys, I am not trying to be a Debbie Downer. I am not trying to put a wet blanket on next season before this season's even over. That's not what I'm trying to do. I'm just trying to look at this from a realistic perspective because, the last thing that I want to do as a diehard 49ers fan is to go into next season with blinders on, with blind faith, thinking that, next year's going to be better. McCaffrey's going to be healthy. Debo's going to snap back into form. Ayuk's going to come back by some miracle in training camp and be ready to go to start the season. And he's going to be 2023 Ayuk. Greenlaw's going to be back in that full form. We're going to figure out some magical way to keep Mooney and keep Hufanga. Excuse me. And it's just not going to happen, guys. It's not. And with all this money that's coming up, that's coming due, and for all you guys out there who say pay Purdy, pay Purdy, pay Purdy, fine. So you tell me, if we do that, how do we load this team around him? How do we do that? How do we make the perfect conditions for Purdy? And then that's not even to say like who's came up with the bubble that he can play in, all 17 games of the year. Because I haven't seen it yet to protect him from all the elements. So, man, guys, I don't see a way where, I understand the fans out there that just have so much dying hope and love and faith in this organization that you want to believe and you want to have just unwavering faith that this team's going to get it done, that Kyle's going to get it done, that John's going to get it done, that Purdy's going to come out of his phone booth with the cape on and he's going to just do it. But let's be honest, guys. Let's really look at what's going on here. You can throw out all this stupid Lombardi shit that you want to throw out, okay? I don't care about quarterback EPA and all this other bullshit. What does your eyes tell you? Truthfully, what does your eyes tell you? You have seen Brock all season without his Avengers team around him. You've seen Brock last season in a 3-game skid where he was missing a couple of those All-Pros. And then you have seen Brock when he has all these weapons. And it's not a small sample size, guys. We're 14 weeks into this season. We're 3 games from last season. So that's 17. That's a season's worth of games where he has basically put up mediocre at best numbers. So you tell me how that is not an accurate sample size, because the way I look at it is he has basically put up as many bad games or average games or mediocre games as he has great ones. So, I mean, even in all those games when the 49ers were winning, If you take out the 3 games last season, that 3-game skid, and you put all the other wins, it's not like he played great in those games. What about the Baltimore game? And we lost that game. But even in the wins last year, you're telling me that every single win last year, Brock played great? What about in the playoffs? Did Brock play great against Green Bay? Did Brock play great against Detroit? Did he play great in the Super Bowl? No. He played okay. But is okay $60 million in the playoffs? Isn't that when your $60 million quarterback is supposed to really show up? Isn't that when your $60 million quarterback is supposed to be like, we are not losing? And I guess maybe you could say that about the Detroit game. And I guess every comeback, no matter who it is, it requires a little bit of luck. So I'll give that to Brock. Okay. But, you know, look at someone like Josh Allen. When the playoffs hit, he takes his game to another level. You look at Patrick Mahomes. When the game matters, when his team needs him the most, when does he not step up? Tell me the last time he didn't step up. So, with or without all pros, those are $60 million quarterbacks. So, the thing is with Brock is there's just as much evidence out there. If you're being objective, if you're being real with yourself, there is just as much evidence out there to not pay Brock as there is to pay Brock. Because if not more, in all honesty, probably more. Because people, you guys who are big Brock homers, Brock supporters, I won't even say supporters because I'm a Brock supporter. Okay. So I will say Brock homers, Brock apologists. For all of you out there who want to say that next year it'll get better because everybody will come back healthy. And that's fine. We can re-sign Brock for $60 million a year and backload the contract so his cap hit in the first 2 or 3 years is minimal. Okay. Let's say you're right and McCaffrey comes back as an all-pro and Debo comes back as an all-pro and Ayuk comes back as an all-pro. Let's say all these wishes that you're making for some reason get granted. What happens when his money does kick in? Because at some point you got to pay it. So, and then what happens when in the future, because McCaffrey is going to be 29 years old, because Debo is on the other side of 30 and George is on the other side of 30 and Trent misses games every year. Okay. Fred Warner's got some mileage on him. Bosa seems to be getting nicked up more often. So let's say they all come back next season and they're relatively healthy to start the season. What happens when these guys start to go down, even in short stints? Then what? Because we know what Brock does in those situations. So that's the thing, If you really are, I think what it comes down to is at the end of the day, people need to make the decision on whether am I a fan of the 49ers or am I a fan of Brock Purdy? I'm a fan of both, but my number one loyalty, it belongs to the 49ers. So the best thing in my opinion is to rip the Band-Aid off because I want to win another trophy. And as long as we're trying to pay Brock Purdy $60 million a year, as long as we're trying to keep Debo and McCaffrey and Juszczyk and all these guys that are older and oft injured, that's not going to happen. And as much as I respect these guys and I'm grateful to these guys for everything that they've brought to the organization, I'm more interested in winning. I'm more invested in a Super Bowl than I am their own individual success. and their own individual bank accounts. So no matter what, Brock's going to get paid somewhere. I don't think he's getting 60 million anywhere, but he's going to get something somewhere. He'll be fine. His career is going to go on. His bank account's going to be fine. I don't care. What I care about is another trophy, another Super Bowl victory. That's what I care about. And so I guess what it comes down to is my option. I would sit down with Brock and I would be like, look, bud, you got a couple options here. You know, option number one is you have played for us for 3 seasons for pennies, basically for free. And we appreciate that. And we want to show you some form of that appreciation. Now, we realize we're not supposed to pay players for what they have done, but for what they're going to do. But in your case, we're going to do a little bit of both. So we would be willing to give you, and this is me speaking as, Jed York and John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan. I would say, Brock, we would be willing to give you a 1-year deal worth $40 million a year. And at the end of that 1-year deal, let's see how it goes. Let's see how you played. And at that point, we can work out a longer extension, or, we can do another one of these deals or whatever. But for now, we'll do a 1-year, $40 million a year deal. And we will agree not to franchise you after that. That would be option number one. I would say option number two, and I personally like this one quite a bit less, would be like, okay, Brock, option number two is we will pay you a 1-year deal worth $47 million, $48 million. But at the end of that, we reserve the right to franchise you. And then the third option is you hold out. You don't want to accept either one of those deals. You hold out and we trade you. Because I do believe, I don't know who, and I was listening to the guys today talk about it, and Jesse and Grant and Coach and Ryan. I don't know who though would trade for him, but I think somebody out there would. Somebody out there is going to be a little bit gun shy about the prospects of drafting one of these rookie quarterbacks and feel like at least they know what they're getting with Brock. And maybe it's a little bit safer of a bet to go with Brock than one of those rookies. It might buy him a couple of years. Now, the problem with that is, other than the Raiders, all the teams who have money and need a quarterback play in cold weather. That throws a big wrench into it. And I really do think that the Raiders are going to want to make more of a splash than Brock Purdy. So I really do think that the Raiders are going to go hard for Shadur, just because of the splash. That's what the Raiders have always been about, making the biggest splash. And that's why they're not successful, because they care more about the media, the newspaper headline, than they care about the box score. So, I would say it might be tough to find someone to trade for him, but I do think somebody would. And maybe that's a little short-sighted, because as I think about it, I can't really honestly think of a team that would be willing to pay him and give up a pick for him. But I do believe somebody would. I think maybe it would be somebody who is out on their quarterback and we're just not aware of it right now. Like, how does Indy actually feel about Anthony Richardson? How do they really feel about him? Because he's just not good. There's a team like that. Maybe how does Arizona actually feel about Kyler Murray? How does Seattle really feel about Geno Smith? Although it rains quite a bit in Seattle, so I don't know if that's the smartest idea. Um, so I think that there could be a team or two out there that we're just not thinking of that may be a little bit out on their quarterback. You know, maybe somebody the last few weeks of this season, somebody goes down. Who knows? I really don't know. And I don't wish that on anybody, but I really do believe that somebody out there would trade for him. Maybe not a first round pick, but maybe a second rounder or a second and a third, something like that. But what I would say is either way, you cannot give Purdy a 5-year contract. I- and here's my thing. I don't see an avenue to us because we have to build this team up in the trenches. We need offensive line and defensive line help. I just don't see an avenue to having all pro playmakers being brought onto this team unless we hit like big time miracles in the draft. And man, in the early rounds, especially, I just don't have any reason to have that faith in Kyle and John. So, with that being said, you can't give Brock a 5-year contract at any number. You can't give Brock a 5-year, 120 million or $200 million contract. $40 million. You can't do that because you at some point we need to be ready to get a franchise quarterback in here. That should always be the goal until you have him. So this team needs to continue to draft quarterbacks. And so no matter what you pay Purdy, I think it needs to be a maximum of a 3-year deal with an out after 2. And maybe even an out after the first one. I would even say keep giving him 1-year deals, even if you have to pay a little bit more. And then, a 1-year deal, ideally for 38 million, maybe you pay him 42 instead because it's a 1-year deal. So my thing is you need to draft a quarterback. And I'm not talking about a 7th or a 6th round quarterback. You need to draft like a third. Kyle sucks at drafting in the third round anyways. He always drafts some like big time project, not very good running back or wide receiver or a kicker. So, those are usually wasted picks. So why not draft a quarterback and see what you got? Because you got a good quarter. So there's no pressure on him to come in and be a starter right away. So draft one in the 3rd round this year. And then do it again next year and the year after that. But at some point, we've got to be ready or on a mission to get a franchise quarterback. And I know people say, well, that's what every team tries to do, but do they really? Because, I don't think that, I think the 49ers tried with Trey. They fell in to Purdy. And so, I think that the number one goal should be that. Because ultimately, I think this team they've kicked the can too far down the road with most of these contracts to be able to flip it around really quickly. And I think that the way that Kyle builds teams is not really conducive to develop or to what's the word I'm trying to think of here. It's not really conducive to finding superstars because he doesn't like to play young guys unless there's a bunch of injuries. So even if he were to draft a playmaker in the 2nd round with Ayuk and Debo and Jennings and Pearsall here, because Kyle likes his guys with experience. What are the odds that we're even going to get to know that those guys are superstars or elite players? So my thing is that I don't see an avenue for this team to turn it around quickly. Maybe I'm wrong. Hopefully I'm wrong. As a fan, I really, really, really hope that I'm wrong. Um, and again, guys, I'm not trying to be negative. I am not trying to be a Debbie Downer, but I also am not gonna just go blindly into next season thinking that everything is gonna be roses, because it's not. There's no evidence to lead me to believe that. And you know, unless there's some trick that Kyle and John have up their sleeve that all of us are just missing, I believe next season is going to be very, very similar to this season and potentially worse, because I do believe that just because of what they're going to have to do with Purdy, we're going to lose some talent on this team. And at this point in time, I really have no faith that Kyle and John are going to knock it out of the park in the first and the second round. I just don't. I don't have that belief in that faith. So, you know, I'm actually going to go, to the combine this year. Um because I believe that this is a super important draft for this franchise. And I think a lot about the future of this franchise is going to be dependent on this draft. So I want to go. I want to go look at these players in person. You know, I want to go kind of see if I can somehow get a glimpse into the scouts and our coaches and general managers of the 49ers when they're there, if I can kind of get a glance into who seems to pique their interest, who they get up for. Maybe I won't get to see that at all, and that's fine, but maybe I will. And so I'm going to go. I've already made up my mind that I'm going to go check it out and really try to get a head start on, a good direction for this team. But I don't know, guys. I think that the best bet, and here's the other thing when it comes to the draft. If a quarterback is available when we pick in the first round and Kyle Shanahan is actually convicted on that quarterback, then take him. I'm not the biggest supporter of Kyle keeping his job here. I'm not the biggest believer in Kyle as a quarterback developer or any of those things. But the fact of the matter is, Kyle's probably not going anywhere. Probably not this year, probably not next year. So, my only position I can have as a fan is to support him. I don't agree with the way that the guy does things. I don't think he is a genius coach. I don't think that he's a great coach. I think that it probably is time for him to move on, but it doesn't matter what I think. What matters is what Jed thinks, and Jed thinks he's amazing, apparently. So, for that reason, the only position that I can have is to support him and hope the best. And if Kyle thinks that he can get the best out of a different quarterback in the first round of this draft, then Kyle, do what you got to do. So I would prefer it to be some other general manager and some other coach picking the next quarterback of this team, but I just don't see that happening. So I would say, you know, no matter where it is, somewhere a quarterback needs to be drafted. And I would say it's going to be. I just hope it's not in the 6th or 7th round. No later than the 4th would be my preference. And I hope it's somebody, how do I say this without sounding disrespectful to Brock? I hope it's somebody with some traits. Somebody that's got a little bit more arm talent than Brock. Somebody who's going to sit and can learn how to read a defense. someone who can learn how to be an anticipatory thrower, somebody who can learn the ins and outs of the quarterback position on the professional level, but someone who is just naturally gifted, not the other way, not somebody who is ready made to play, but is limited in their skill set physically. We've seen that. And so I would say that we need to draft somebody who's got the athletic and physical traits that needs the work on the other side because he's got time. It's not somebody who needs to jump in there and play right away because they are going to probably sign Brock at least 2 or 3 year deal. So let's get somebody in here who has all the physical ability in the world, but needs a little bit of help on the mental side of the game. And then let's get somebody in here who can develop that part. Somebody in here who can actually work with the quarterback and develop them. Because it's not Kyle. So that would be the way that I would go forward just based off of kind of what I think the 49ers are going to do. Because if it was me, to be completely honest with you, if it was me, because I don't think that Brock is going to be that franchise quarterback. Okay, so I have two ways that I would go. So the number one way that I would go is if we're going to keep Kyle. If we have to keep Kyle and I get to decide how it goes from there, what I would like to see is because we don't know about Brock. So I would like to pay Brock like a $30 million 1-year contract. And I would like to see the rest of that money spent on shoring up the offensive line to be an above average offensive line. I'm not saying it has to be the best offensive line in football. Can it be top 10? Can we do that? And then what I would like to see is we have Jawan. We have Ricky, who I think is better than he's shown. We need to get a receiver in here who can take the top off of the defense. I'm not saying it has to be an all-pro receiver. I'm not saying it has to be a $30 million a year receiver. It just needs to be a good receiver, a decent receiver. And somebody who can keep the defense honest. Somebody who can play, 50 to 60% of the offensive snaps. Somebody who's going to go out there and have to make the safeties in on the defense be aware, be honest. And then with a bolstered offensive line, we'll get to see how Purdy is with a more traditional type of a team. Because we're still going to have a lot of high-priced players. We're still going to have Ayuk that's costing a lot of money, potentially still have Debo, even and whether he's on the team or not, we're still paying for him, right? So money-wise, it's going to be like we have, high-priced players at all these positions, but on the field, not really. We have Jawan. We'll have, a guy who can take the top off. We'll have Kittle and Ricky Pearsall, which is kind of more of a standard receiving corps. And eventually Brandon Ayuk will come back and, maybe he'll come back and be 90% of himself as soon as he comes back. I doubt it, but maybe. But either way, I would like to see what Purdy can do when he's got an above average offensive line and a well-rounded receiving corps. Somebody like Jawan, a possession receiver, somebody that you can throw the ball to who's going to go up and fight for it and get it. Somebody like George, who you can count on whenever you need to throw him the ball. And then somebody who can take the top off the defense. Somebody with some speed. This team needs speed. This team is so slow. And so if we can get that, and then McCaffrey comes back, and whether Kyle uses him as a bell cow back and runs the hell out of him again, or gets smart and uses him in a rotation It doesn't matter. But give Brock that ability. Give Brock that protection so he can feel comfortable. Give him options on every level of the defense or every level of the field. And then let him have a little bit more freedom in the offense. Not just cans. Give him actual audibles. Let him set his own protections. Let's see what he can do and then pay him or don't pay him. But let's see what he can do because we really don't know. Truthfully, we don't really know. We've seen Brock at his best when he has everything perfect around him. And we've seen Brock at his worst with an okay offensive line, not very good receivers. And so I'm sure the truth lies somewhere in the middle. We really don't know. Maybe Brock really is as good as Kirk Cousins. I would say that's Brock's ceiling, truthfully, which is fine. That's fine. I would be willing to pay a younger prime Kirk Cousins $40 to $50 million a year and be able to have some weapons around him. Because in 2 years, quarterbacks are going to be making north of 70 million. So I would be willing to pay Brock 50 because you can put players around him later. If that's the level he can play at, if he can consistently keep defenses honest by hitting a deep pass. The only thing that I can't seem to get past is the weather games. I don't know how you fix that. I don't know. Because it's a mental thing. If it was just handling the wet ball, you tell him practice throwing with the glove and things like this. But it's not that. And so that's the way I would go. Just with Brock, I don't know. We gotta figure it out, but we haven't figured it out yet. So I don't know how you can possibly pay this guy when you don't really know. There's no way that they can possibly say that they know what Brock is. Nobody does. And so keeping Kyle, that would be my ideal situation. Now, my ultimate ideal situation would be, honestly, to start over. Truthfully, start completely over. Let's eat all of this dead money. Let's all these bad contracts, get out from under all of them. Get as many assets because I don't believe we're going to be good in the time frame of the all-pro players that we have. So take all these assets that you have in all-pro players such as Bosa, Trent, McCaffrey, as much as it pains me to say it, even George and Fred, and get what you can for them. And build this team up with another coach, another GM, and build this team up again. Now, that's not going to happen, so I'm not going to get too much into it. That's what I wish would happen, but it's not going to. So my best bet is that Kyle's going to give Brock the money. He's going to keep all the players. Man, I really hate to say that, but I just have this sneaking suspicion that that's how it's going to go. But hopefully it's somewhere in the middle. Hopefully they can reach an agreement with Brock on a team-friendly deal that also benefits him. Because here's the thing, Brock's making $1 million a year. If Brock makes $40 million a year, he's doing all right. Now, I'm not trying to take money away from him. From his perspective, go get all you can. I got into a disagreement with my brother a few weeks ago because he's like, all these guys make too much money. Well, I don't believe that. I don't think that's possible. I don't think if you can get it, go get it. That's the way I look at it. Because I'll tell you one thing, as long as I'm doing something that makes me happy, I'm going to make as much money as I possibly can. And if somebody's willing to pay me for it, I'm going to take it. So, hey, To each their own. Go get it if you can get it. From a fan's perspective, I don't want to pay Brock $60 million. I don't want to pay Brock $50 million. So, you know, I'm really excited for the offseason to see how this goes. I'm nervous as well, but I'm super excited. I think there's going to be a lot of stuff to talk about. I think there's going to be a lot of excitement. Here's the thing, even in a bad year, even in a messed up season like we're having, the 49ers always keep it interesting. They always give us something to talk about. So there's one more thing that I want to address real quick. I've had a couple of comments and some DMs um, telling me that I'm a little bit too emotional on my podcast. In fact, one commenter told me that I'm too emotional on my podcast and that these guys are never going to hear my whimpering and that I need to go get therapy. Oh my gosh. I'm not going to lie. When I read that, I busted up laughing. That shit was hilarious. I'm going to be honest. That was so funny. Um, but here's the thing, guys. When I decided to do this, first and foremost, I'm a fan. I'm not a journalist. I don't work for nobody. I don't got to meet anybody else's standards of professionalism or anything like that. I don't got to try to be neutral or any of that shit. I'm a fan. And when the Niners lose, I get pissed. When the Niners win, I get excited. There's times I want to throw shit through my TV. There's times when I want to go jump in the bed of my truck for joy. So, am I emotional? Yeah, I am. And I'm not going to apologize for that. I'm a fan. I love this team. I love the sport. I love talking about it. And so I said when I did this, when I said I was going to do this channel. Now, here's the thing. Whether this channel blows up or it doesn't, I don't care. I mean, would I like it to? Of course, who wouldn't? Would I like to get 150,000 subscribers like Grant? Hell yeah, that'd be awesome. More so for the ability to meet so many people who love this like I do. Like that would just be the ultimate dream, to be able to share my love of football and the 49ers with hundreds of thousands of other people. How could I be so blessed? That would be amazing. But even if I stick, I think I'm at 38 or 39 subscribers now. Okay, that's fine. I'm okay with that. Um, I just love to talk about football. I love to talk about the 49ers. Sometimes my emotion and my passion is going to come through, and sometimes it's just not. And so, you know, I probably do need to go see a therapist, but for many other things besides my emotion when it comes to football. So, my content is always going to be how I feel in that moment, what I think. And I reserve the right to change my opinion whenever and however I want to. That's the great thing about being a fan, is I'm not trying to be a professional journalist for whichever newspaper or media, outlet. I am just Brian, the San Francisco 49ers fan, who decided one day, after watching all these guys that I admire so much, like Grant Cohn and Jesse Naylor and Ryan Hensley and the coach, even Stats, after watching all these guys, I decided, I want to do that. That looks like fun. That looks like a lot of fun. And so, for those of you that have subscribed and have supported me, for those of you that comment and send me messages, you know what, guys? Thank you. I truly appreciate you. To all you guys out there that don't like my content, that think I'm a clown, that's okay. I appreciate you guys watching me as well. I appreciate you guys, engaging with me and telling me that. That's good. Let's do it. If you think I'm a clown, tell me. That's all right. It don't bother me. I'm ready to go. So guys, until the next show, thanks for watching. I appreciate y'all.